The Grand Ballroom of the Grand Horizon Resort in Beverly Hills was an exhibition of unadulterated high society vanity. Massive crystal chandeliers hung from the vaulted, gold-leaf ceiling, casting a sharp glare over the sea of international investors, Hollywood elite, and European fashion magnates. The air was thick with the scent of white gardenias and expensive champagne, curated specifically to celebrate the 10th anniversary of the Thorn Luxury Hotel group of $500 million hospitality empire that dominated the West Coast. Aria Blackwood sat at a small, circular table tucked away near the kitchen service entrance, her hands folded quietly over her lap. At 28, she wore a simple, unbranded black silk dress, her hair pinned back in a tight, professional bun. For 4 years, Aria had functioned as the invisible backbone of the Thorn empire. While her husband, Dominic Thorn, and his mother, Cassandra, posed for the paparazzi on the red carpet, Aria spent 14-hour days managing the grueling internal logistics, stabilizing union labor disputes, and auditing the razor-thin operational margins of their flagship properties. To the upper-class crowd filling the ballroom, however, Aria was an embarrassing blemish on the Thorn lineage. She was the quiet, working-class girl Dominic had married during a brief, rebellious phase, a woman Cassandra routinely treated like an unpaid executive assistant, excluding her from family portraits and charity galas. To our distinguished global partners, Dominic's voice boomed over the high-end sound system, drawing a roar of polite applause. He stood on the center stage, looking exceptionally sharp in a custom velvet tuxedo. Beside him stood his mother, Cassandra Thorn, her neck heavily draped in ropes of South Sea pearls, her face tightened into a frozen, aristocratic smile. "Tonight, we don't just celebrate 10 years of luxury," Dominic announced, his eyes scanning the crowd with a practiced, media-trained confidence. "We celebrate our absolute expansion into the next stratum of global wealth. The Thorn Group is finalizing an exclusive partnership with a European luxury cartel, solidifying our brand as the ultimate sanctuary for the international elite." As the crowd erupted into cheers, Dominic did not look toward Aria's dark corner. Instead, he reached out his hand to welcome a tall, striking woman in a shimmering couture gown onto the stage. It was Chloe Pendleton, a notorious high-society heiress whose family controlled a multi-billion-dollar media syndicate. Dominic placed a protective, possessive hand over Chloe's waist, whispering something into her ear that made her let out a clear, melodic laugh. Cassandra stepped down from the podium, her diamond-encrusted heels clicking sharply against the polished marble as she bypassed the primary tables, heading directly toward the shadow where Aria sat. She didn't offer her daughter-in-law a glass of champagne. Instead, she slid a thick, white vellum legal folder onto the linen tablecloth, landing it right next to Aria's untouched water glass. "Let's minimize the drama, Aria," Cassandra said, her voice a chilling, low murmur that carried no warmth whatsoever. "The European cartel requires an absolute alignment of brand identity. Dominic has reached a level of global elite society where a plain, low-class girl from the service sector is a severe operational liability. You simply lack the aristocratic caliber to remain the face of this family." Dominic stepped off the stage and joined his mother, his face a flat mask of corporate indifference. He looked down at Aria, completely devoid of any trace of the vows he had spoken to her 4 years ago. "Chloe is pregnant with the future heir to the Vance Thorn alignment," Dominic said smoothly, tossing a sleek black leather document holder onto the folder. "I've instructed our litigation team to waive the standard multi-year asset division. Sign the marital dissolution waiver, pack your personal items from the penthouse before dawn, and leave. Don't embarrass yourself by trying to fight our corporate lawyers for a piece of the hotel chain. My mother's attorneys have spent months ensuring our core equity is completely sealed under the Thorn family name." They both watched her, waiting for the predictable breakdown. Cassandra expected frantic tears. Dominic expected a desperate plea, reminders of how she had saved their properties from financial default during the pandemic, or a fierce negotiation for a larger cash payout. Instead, Arya reached out, her fingers perfectly steady as she drew a simple silver pen from her handbag. She didn't read the financial payout schedules. She didn't glance at the standard severance clauses. She turned directly to the final execution page and signed her name in quick, elegant characters. Arya Blackwood. She capped the pen with a sharp, definitive click. There. It is finished, Dominic. Dominic blinked, a flicker of genuine irritation crossing his face. The absolute lack of resistance robbed him of the powerful, dominant victory his ego had rehearsed. You're not going to argue. You understand you walk away with 0 shares in the Thorn Hotel Group? I understand perfectly, Arya said, standing up slowly, her posture radiating an unshakable, ancient composure that made Cassandra's heavy pearls look gaudy and cheap. She looked at her husband and mother-in-law, a quiet, almost pitying smile touching her lips. Enjoy your $500 million expansion, Dominic. I hope the foundation of this hotel is as stable as your lawyers claim it is. It is, Cassandra snapped, tossing a crisp $100 bill onto the table with a sneer. Consider that an allowance for a cab back to the suburbs, dear. The elite are working now. Arya didn't touch the money. She turned and walked out of the grand ballroom, her footsteps light and unhurried. The moment she stepped into the pouring Beverly Hills rain outside the hotel, a sleek, unmarked black luxury SUV pulled up to the curb. Arya climbed into the quiet, leather interior, where her private real estate attorney, Marcus Vance, was already waiting with an encrypted tablet. She pulled a secure smartphone from her purse and looked out the window as the hotel lights faded into the dark. The submissive, quiet worker persona she had maintained to keep her marriage alive was officially gone. Marcus, Arya said, her voice dropping into a register of cold, absolute authority. The dissolution is signed. Dominic and Cassandra have officially terminated my executive status within the management company. Marcus let out a quiet, cynical chuckle, his fingers tapping the tablet screen to authorize a transmission to the State Land Registry Office. They truly believe they own the empire, don't they? They spent 4 years focusing on the architecture and the high society guests. Arya replied smoothly, her eyes reflecting the cold neon glare of the city. They completely forgot to check who actually owns the dirt beneath their feet. Trigger the master land lease revocation immediately. Let's see how much their luxury hotel is worth when they are evicted from my soil. While Dominic and Cassandra stood beneath the flashing media lights of the Grand Horizon ballroom, toast after toast ringing out to celebrate their incoming European investment, the digital landscape beneath their empire shifted with terrifying speed. Inside the matte black SUV, Marcus Vance turned the tablet screen toward Arya, showing a red, blinking status bar on the California Commercial Land Registry mainframe. The 72-hour grace period embedded within the original corporate infrastructure permit has officially hit 0, Marcus stated, his tone dry, precise, and absolute. Dominic's high-priced corporate attorneys completely ignored the automated warning notices we sent to their registered agent at dawn, likely dismissing them as a weak, post-divorce bluff from an emotional ex-wife. They didn't even open the file. They had made a catastrophic error. Arya didn't need to engage Dominic in an ugly, multi-year divorce court to strip him of his wealth. She didn't need to leak family scandals to the tabloids. She didn't even need a single share of stock in the Thorn Luxury Hotel Group. She owned the physical ground beneath their flagship property. 4 years ago, when the Thorn Group was searching for prime Beverly Hills real estate to build their $500 million crown jewel hotel, the land was controlled by a reclusive, old-money estate that refused to negotiate with flashy, aggressive corporate developers like Cassandra Thorn. Arya had quietly used her maternal family's private, quiet environmental asset trust, the Blackwood Estate Trust, to purchase the entire contiguous commercial acreage under her maiden name for a fraction of its future value. She had then leased the surface access rights to the Thorn Luxury Hotel Group under a highly restrictive, conditional provisional land lease. The contract contained an ironclad executive retention covenant. The lease was dirt cheap and valid for 99 years, only as long as Arya Blackwood held an active executive stake and a primary management role within the operating company. Dominic and Cassandra had spent the last 3 years pouring $300 million of investor capital into grading the soil, installing Italian marble lobbies, and running deep water infrastructure directly onto that property. They thought they were building a family dynasty. In reality, they had been installing multi-million-dollar assets on land that belonged entirely to the woman they had just thrown out of their boardroom like a servant. The master land access revocation has been officially timestamped and finalized by the federal registrar, Marcus announced, clicking a final button on his laptop. The blue lines of registry data vanished, replaced by a cold, clinical string of text. Lease tavties res revoked. Property access denied. Emergency eviction injunction transmitted. County marshals. Arya leaned back in the luxurious leather seat, picking up a bottle of still water. She took a slow, deliberate sip, her gaze fixed entirely on the flashing digital lights of the Beverly Hills financial district fading into background. They wanted a high society model to match their elite aesthetic, Marcus, Arya murmured, her voice radiating a brilliant, freezing detachment. Let's see how well their elite aesthetic holds up when the county marshals lock the front doors of their flagship resort. Back in the grand ballroom of the Grand Horizon, Dominic was raising his glass to the lead investor of the European luxury cartel, completely blind to the fact that the automated legal system had just initiated a 72-hour countdown clock that would completely strip his family of the very ground they walked on. The media pavilion at the edge of Beverly Hills was a masterclass in high society spectacle. Less than 24 hours after the brutal boardroom coup at the Grand Horizon Resort, Cassandra Thorne had mobilized the family's entire PR apparatus to host an emergency global press launch. Giant holographic displays projected stunning, high-definition 3D renderings of the Horizon Oasis, their next planned international expansion into the California afternoon sky, showcasing over-water luxury villas and deep-water yacht slips. The air was filled with the scent of expensive white lilies, and waiters in tailored white tuxedos glided through the crowd of international journalists, luxury travel editors, and Wall Street real estate analysts. Serafina, now operating as the brand's primary marketing lead under Cassandra's watchful eye, stood at the center of the media stage, wearing an asymmetrical cream designer dress that practically screamed corporate royalty. She beamed under the bright studio lights, flashing a wide, practiced smile for the flashing cameras. Ladies and gentlemen of the global press, Cassandra announced, her voice amplified by the state-of-the-art surround sound system. Today we don't just announce a resort. We announce a sovereign-backed dynasty. The Thorne Luxury Hotel Group, alongside our esteemed partners from the European luxury cartel, is officially breaking ground on a trillion-dollar era of sustainable hospitality. The crowd erupted into enthusiastic applause. In the front row, representatives from the banking syndicates nodded in deep satisfaction, their eyes darting to the massive digital countdown clock on the side display that marked the official closing of the first $300 million institutional investment wire. Dominic stood just behind his mother, looking sharp but slightly tightly wound in a new tailored suit. He stepped up to the microphone, adjusting his cuffs. As the chief executive officer of the Thorne Group, I want to assure our investors the transition of leadership has been entirely seamless. We have excised the low-level, bureaucratic bottlenecks that previously slowed our operational velocity. From this moment on, the Thorne name controls 100% of this vision. Cassandra leaned into Dominic's shoulder, whispering with venomous glee beneath the cover of the applause. Look at this, Dominic. Every major financial network is carrying this live. That pathetic, working-class servant you used to call a wife is probably sitting in some drab, cheap apartment watching us take our rightful place at the top of the world. We got rid of her just in time." Dominic let out a smug, quiet chuckle. "You were right, Mother. Aria was good for auditing laundry logistics, but she simply lacked the international caliber required for a stage like this. The asset waiver she signed is completely ironclad. She's completely out of the equation." Just as Dominic stepped back to allow the lead investor from the European cartel to sign the symbolic golden cornerstone document on stage, his phone began to vibrate violently in his pocket. He glanced down, his brow furrowing as he saw the name flashing on the screen. It was Harrison, the head of their massive on-site engineering crew at the flagship Beverly Hills property. Dominic clicked the ignore button without a second thought, shoving the device back into his pocket. This was his moment of absolute triumph. He wasn't going to let a frantic project manager or a minor labor issue interrupt his entry into the global elite. He didn't check his priority corporate inbox. He didn't see the urgent, high-priority alert that had reached his corporate legal department at exactly 1:45 p.m. from the State Land Registry office. He truly believed Aria was powerless, completely blind to the fact that the clock on the automated land use revocation she had triggered was down to its final 60 seconds. While Dominic and Cassandra stood beneath the flashing media lights at the pavilion, basking in the applause of the international press, Aria sat in a quiet, glass-walled conference room on the 4th floor of a private maritime terminal in Portland, Maine. The space was stark, minimalist, and cool, illuminated by the steady blue glow of 3 ultra-wide external monitors tracking the construction and land data. Outside her window, the gray Atlantic waters surged against the stone harbor, a sharp contrast to the manufactured glamour of Beverly Hills. Aria's fingers moved across her slim laptop keyboard with unhurried precision. On her left monitor, a live digital stream showed the public media broadcast from the California pavilion, photographs of Cassandra smiling radiantly, flanked by Dominic and the executive board of the European luxury cartel. They looked powerful, wealthy, and entirely untouchable. On her right monitor, a completely different narrative was unfolding. It was the master administrative dashboard for the Blackwood Estate Trust. A flashing crimson notification indicated that the 72-hour grace period embedded within the Thorn provisional land use permit had officially hit zero. Dominic's high-priced corporate attorneys had completely ignored the formal, automated warning notice sent to their registered agent at dawn, likely dismissing it as a weak, post-divorce bluff from an emotional ex-wife. They had severely miscalculated. Aria didn't need to fight Dominic in an ugly, multi-year divorce court to strip him of his wealth. She didn't need to leak family secrets to the tabloids. She owned the ground beneath his feet. "You really should have audited the property lines, Dominic," Aria murmured into the quiet room, her expression completely serene. When Aria originally structured the surface access lease for the flagship hotel 4 years ago, she didn't just sign a standard real estate contract, she built a legal fortress. She knew the Thorn family's defining flaw was their blinding, narcissistic arrogance. They took credit for every grand structure, but understood nothing about the underlying asset titles that supported them. Because of this, she had quietly embedded an absolute executive retention clause into the deed restrictions. The moment the Thorn board voted to terminate her position as chief operating officer, they automatically triggered a material breach of the property covenant, rendering their entire multi-million-dollar flagship resort an illegal trespass. Aria moved her mouse cursor over to a prominent, glowing command icon on her dashboard labeled "Enforce Land Trust Sovereignty and Issue Cease and Desist." She did not hesitate. She pressed the button. Instantly, the scrolling lines of blue data on her screen ceased, replaced by a cold, clinical string of text that blinked in a slow, rhythmic pattern. Lease status, revoked. Property access, denied. Federal injunction transmitted to county marshals. Arya leaned back in her ergonomic chair, picking up her cup of warm black tea. She took a slow, deliberate sip, her gaze fixed entirely on the live video feed of the press gala on her left monitor. The structural floor had been pulled out silently from a quiet office in Maine, and the devastating ripple effect was traveling straight down the West Coast at the speed of light, headed directly for the grand media stage in New York and California. Inside the private VIP tent at the Beverly Hills Media Pavilion, Dominic stood at the head of the polished glass signing table, his heavy gold fountain pen hovering exactly an inch above the multi-million-dollar funding agreement. He looked directly at the chief executive of the European luxury cartel, flashing his most charismatic, media-trained smile. Ladies and gentlemen, when you invest in the Thorn Luxury Hotel Group, you aren't just funding real estate. You are funding a global paradigm shift in luxury. This flagship property is the absolute crown jewel of our dynasty. The international board members and retail banking executives nodded in deep admiration, their own pens ready to sign the counterpart documents. Cassandra stood near the silk-draped entrance, her heavy South Sea pearls clicking softly as she sipped champagne, her face radiating the smug victory of a queen mother who had successfully purged a commoner from her kingdom. She cued the massive interactive video wall behind the stage to transition from the 3D renderings to a live, high-definition security and operational feed of their flagship, Beverly Hills Resort, wanting the investors to see the active, bustling luxury layout in real time. And now, Dominic announced, his voice booming with absolute authority. Let's look at the actual physical foundation of your investment. Mother, initialize the live master site stream. Cassandra pressed the button on her remote. She expected the massive screen to instantly illuminate with wealthy guests lounging by the marble pools and elite vehicles pulling into the grand courtyard, demonstrating the flawless, rapid operational velocity of the Thorn brand. The screen blackout. Instead, the live feed froze. The digital interface flickered violently once, twice, and then vanished into a pitch-black screen. A sudden, piercing error tone echoed through the high-end surround sound system of the pavilion. The sleek corporate presentation graphics disappeared, replaced by a cold, clinical string of bright red text that began to blink in a slow, terrifying rhythm. Critical operational error. Access denied. Trespass warning issued. Proper recovery provided by Antitrust Authority. A sharp, confused murmur instantly rippled through the panel of international banking executives. The warm smiles on the faces of the European investors vanished, replaced by narrowed eyes and immediate, defensive posture. Dominic's breath caught sharply in his throat. His finger mashed the remote control repeatedly, but the black display remained stubbornly locked. Just a minor satellite synchronization delay with our local servers. Dominic stammered into the room, a forced, hollow laugh escaping his lips as a sudden wave of cold sweat broke out across his forehead. Give our technical team 10 seconds to verify the pipeline. He stepped away from the table, his face turning a deep, angry red as he frantically gestured to his chief financial officer, who had just burst through the double doors of the tent. The CFO's face was completely pale, his hands shaking as he held a printed legal notice. Dominic grabbed him by the arm, his voice a furious whisper. What the hell is going on with the Beverly Hills stream? The European cartel board is sitting right inside that room. Dominic, it's an absolute catastrophe, the CFO whispered frantically, his voice cracking under immense panic. The satellite didn't glitch. Our servers are perfectly fine. But our entire $500 million flagship hotel has just been locked down by county marshals. Every single entrance is being chained, guests are being evacuated, and our staff is being escorted off the property for criminal trespass. That's impossible, Cassandra hissed, stepping into the shadow of the tent, her frozen smile finally shattering into an expression of pure rage. The Thorn Group spent $300 million of construction capital building that hotel. Nobody has the authority to evict my business. They didn't need an eviction notice from a standard court. The CFO groaned, trembling as he pulled up the property deed on his tablet. The land registry just released an automated enforcement order. Cassandra, the Thorn Group doesn't own that soil. The underlying commercial acreage is held entirely by a private entity called the Blackwood Estate Trust. Our access was tied to a provisional COO retention covenant. The moment we terminated area yesterday afternoon, we legally triggered an immediate lease expiration. We are trespassing on her family's trust land. Dominic stared at the tablet screen, his mind spinning into absolute chaos as the name registered with devastating clarity. Blackwood Estate Trust. Area. Before he could even breathe, a sudden chime echoed from his phone. A text message from an unverified, encrypted number flashed on the glass screen. Enjoy your luxury blueprints, Dominic. It's the last time you'll ever sell a horizon that doesn't belong to you. See you in the restructuring room tomorrow morning. Dominic's hand lost all its strength, the phone slipping from his fingers and clattering loudly against the carpeted stage. He looked through the glass doors of the VIP tent, where the international investors were already standing up, their executive assistants frantically packing away their leather folders as news of the federal and county shutdown began to trend across the financial tickers. Cassandra was clutching her pearls, her face twisted in absolute horror. The brilliant $500 million empire they had stolen from a quiet manager was disintegrating in real time, and Dominic was standing completely exposed in the middle of the wreckage. The emergency hearing room at the California Department of Land Management was suffocatingly cold. Outside, the midday sun beat down on the sprawling streets of Los Angeles, but inside, the atmosphere felt as stark and unyielding as an Arctic winter. Dominic sat on the left side of the long glass table, flanked by his mother, Cassandra Thorne, and their senior real estate litigator. Dominic looked completely unrecognizable from the confident CEO who had stood beneath the flashing media lights just 24 hours prior. His tailored suit was wrinkled, his hair was messy, and his bloodshot eyes stared blankly at the tabletop. Following the catastrophic flagship shutdown, the Thorn Luxury Hotel Group's stock had plummeted by 45% in morning trading. The European luxury cartel hadn't just paused the investment. They had filed a massive multi-million-dollar fraud claim to recover their initial escrow deposits. Yet, despite the smoke rising from her destroyed dynasty, Cassandra forced a desperate, haughty glare onto her face as the heavy glass doors at the back of the room swung open. Aria Blackwood walked in. She wore an immaculate, deep charcoal-tailored suit that radiated an unshakable, quiet authority. Her hair was styled into a sharp, professional bob, and her expression was entirely calm, completely devoid of the corporate exhaustion that had defined her for 4 years. Behind her walked Marcus Vance, carrying a slim leather folder containing the original master deed restrictions. Dominic's lawyer looked up from his notes, clearing his throat nervously. Your Honor, before we begin, we must recognize that the Thorn Group has spent over $300 million in structural improvements on this site. This is a private, marital asset dispute that should not disrupt a critical commercial hospitality engine. This is not a marital asset dispute, Marcus Vance said smoothly, taking a seat next to Aria and opening his folder with precise, measured movements. We are here today to finalize the absolute asset repossession and enforce the terms of the land lease termination. The contract speaks for itself. Cassandra let out a sharp, bitter laugh, leaning forward over the table. She desperately needed to reclaim her sense of control. Let's stop the theatrics, Aria. I don't know what kind of legal loophole you manipulated with the land registry, but our corporate treasury can buy you out 10 times over. Your standard severance check is right here. Sign the execution decree, accept the cash, and pack your bags permanently. A girl from your background should be grateful for the lifestyle we afforded you. Arya didn't even glance at the check. She looked directly into Cassandra's eyes, her gaze entirely cold. The papers are already signed, Cassandra. I signed them on your linen tablecloth yesterday afternoon. Today is simply about enforcing the exact terms that you and your son insisted upon. The presiding land referee entered the room, calling the session to order with a sharp tap of his gavel. Before this panel signs off on any emergency operational stays, the law requires the Lesser's Council to read aloud the finalized property covenants, specifically taking into account the verified ownership of the underlying commercial acreage. The Thorn Group's lawyer pulled the master document package toward him. He adjusted his glasses, completely confident that the prenuptial agreement he had reviewed years ago would protect the family wealth and leave Arya with nothing. He flipped to the addendum pages, his mouth opening to speak. Your Honor, according to the standard corporate lease executed by both parties, all concrete foundations, luxury hotel structures, and utility grids installed under the name Thorn Luxury Hotel Group remain strictly. Suddenly, the words caught violently in his throat. The lawyer's eyes widened behind his lenses, scanning the fine print of the land registration attached to the file. The color drained from his face so quickly it looked as if he had stopped breathing. His hands began to tremble, the thick parchment paper rattling loudly against the surface of the glass table. Richard? Cassandra frowned, her sharp voice cutting through the room with intense impatience. What is wrong with you? Read the clause. Remind her that she leaves with nothing. I can't, the lawyer whispered, a bead of cold sweat dripping down his temple. Read it, counselor, the referee commanded, his voice echoing authoritatively in the silent room. The lawyer swallowed hard, his voice cracking under the weight of the text. Appendix G, Section 5. In the event of an executive separation or dissolution of employment initiated by the board against the presiding officer, Arya Blackwood, the provisional land lease automatically expires. Furthermore, he stopped, looking up at Dominic with pure horror. Keep reading, Dominic shouted, slamming his hand onto the table, an icy wave of panic violently seizing his chest. Furthermore, since the underlying concrete structures, marble pavilions, and $300 million of structural infrastructure were installed under a conditional lease, the termination of said lease triggers an immediate default. 100% of the physical improvements, buildings, and hospitality assets are hereby forfeited immediately to the landowner, the Blackwood Estate Trust, to satisfy the outstanding trespass liability. The tenant walks away with zero equity in the physical site. The room erupted into absolute chaos. No, that's a lie. She's a nobody. She was just a low-class assistant. Cassandra screamed, lunging us the glass table toward her former daughter-in-law, her face contorted in rage, only for two county marshals to instantly step forward and pin her firmly back into her chair. Dominic's hand flew to his throat, his face twisting in silent, paralyzed shock as he stared at the woman he had dismissed as a plain servant. Arya slowly stood up from her chair, looking down at the panicked, broken family who had tried to discard her in the dark. You told me to remember my place, Cassandra, Arya said, her voice dropping into a register of absolute victory that silenced the room. You should have checked who actually owned the dirt beneath your feet before you decided to call me an embarrassing blemish. The fallout from the land management hearing room was instantaneous and unmerciful. By 2:00 p.m. that afternoon, the news had completely shattered the international hospitality world. Wall Street financial blogs, luxury travel outlets, and digital ticker boards across Beverly Hills flashed the exact same breaking headline. The Thorn Empire collapses. $500 million flagship seized as ousted executive reclaims absolute land sovereignty. Dominic stood in the grand marble lobby of the Thorn Luxury Hotel Group's corporate headquarters, staring blankly at the two armed security guards who blocked his path to the private executive elevators. In his hands, he held a flimsy cardboard box filled with his personal desk items, a gold-plated pen set, a few framed photos of his luxury yacht trips, and a stack of revoked corporate credentials. His executive security badge had been cleanly snapped in half at the front reception desk. "You can't do this," Dominic yelled, his voice cracking with desperation as he glared at the building supervisor. "I am the CEO. I am Dominic Thorne. My family built this brand from the ground up. This is my project." "Not anymore, Mr. Thorne," the supervisor replied coldly, his tone entirely devoid of the sycophantic warmth Dominic had grown accustomed to over the past 4 years. "We received an official corporate directive from the Blackwood Estate Trust on behalf of the new majority structural asset owner. Your access to the design suites, the internal databases, and the operational servers has been permanently terminated. You have 24 hours to vacate the corporate-owned penthouse as well, as it is a luxury asset cross-collateralized under the flagship properties umbrella." Before Dominic could process the massive blow, his phone vibrated violently in his pocket. It was the lead managing director from the European luxury Carl, calling from their Manhattan bureau. Dominic answered frantically, pressing the phone to his ear with a shaking hand. "Hello? Hello, listen to me. The lawyers are sorting out the lease anomaly right now." "Save your breath, Dominic." The director's voice cut through the line, cold, transactional, and absolute. "The investment deal is officially dead. Our compliance team just finished reviewing the audited title filings from the Land Management Court. The European cartel will not allow its capital, its reputation, or its brand to be associated with a family that has been legally exposed for multi-million-dollar developer misrepresentation and stripped of their own flagship soil overnight." "What about the international expansion?" Dominic stammered, looking around the bustling lobby as corporate workers began to whisper and point at him from the glass mezzanine. "My mother knows that we are the face of this." "Cassandra Thorne is currently finalizing her calendar to settle the outstanding media debts with our production agencies," the director interrupted ruthlessly. "Don't act our board again. You're a structural liability, Dominic. And in this industry, we liquidate liabilities." The line went dead with a sharp, definitive click. Dominic slowly lowered the phone, his hands shaking so violently that a heavy glass architectural achievement award slid out of his cardboard box and shattered against the polished marble floor. At the exact same moment, a notification popped up on his screen from his private bank. "Account status alert. Primary personal and business credit lines frozen due to ongoing institutional asset repossession and default acceleration." Every single domino he and Cassandra had meticulously set up, the multi-million-dollar valuation, the elite international connections, the absolute high society standing had fallen in a matter of hours. The very legal and corporate systems they had used to crush Arya had turned their massive, cold gears and crushed him instead. He was no longer a hospitality titan looking down on the world. He was just a man standing in a lobby, holding a box of paper trash, with the afternoon traffic rushing past outside the glass doors. The wind outside the flagship resort was relentless, sweeping across the manicured palm trees of the grand entrance and carrying with it a harsh chill that signaled the end of an era. On the wet concrete sidewalk, a scene was unfolding that drew the immediate, hushed stares of departing hotel guests, high society neighbors, and passing onlookers. Cassandra Thorne stood huddled near the valet driveway, her expensive mink coat offering absolutely no protection against her internal panic. Her face, usually a mask of aristocratic perfection and unyielding snobbery, was flushed with a mixture of rage and deep, raw humiliation. When the heavy glass doors opened and Arya Blackwood stepped out, flanked by Marcus Vance and her newly appointed property management detail, Cassandra rushed forward, completely abandoning every shred of the upper-class dignity she had spent a lifetime cultivating. "Arya, please stop," Cassandra cried out, her voice cracking as she reached out a gloved hand, only to be politely but firmly blocked by Arya's lead security guard. "You have to listen to me. This has gone too far. Dominic is completely ruined. They are repossessing our private assets. His name is permanently blacklisted across the entire venture capital network, and the creditors are calling in every single corporate loan. You were a part of this family once, Arya. You can't do this to him. You can't do this to our family." Arya stopped. She turned slowly, her expression completely unreadable behind her dark, designer sunglasses. She looked down at Cassandra, whose eyes were wide with desperation, tears threatening to ruin her meticulously applied makeup. "Your family, Cassandra?" Arya asked, her voice calm, slicing through the air like a razor. "A day ago, you sat across from me at the gala and told me I looked like a maid next to a true high society woman. You stood by and cheered while your son tried to throw me out of our own project with nothing but a $100 bill and 4 years of grueling executive labor you dismissed as low-level service. Where was your sense of family then?" "We were wrong," Cassandra pleaded, her hands trembling violently as she looked past Arya toward Marcus Vance, hoping for a shred of legal leniency or pity. "We didn't know. We didn't understand your true capacity. If you just drop the immediate lease forfeiture clause, we can settle this quietly. We can fix this, Arya. We can restructure the hotel group's equity." "You still don't get it," Arya said softly, stepping closer so only Cassandra could hear her next words over the hum of the idling vehicles. "You're not sorry you treated me like a servant, Cassandra. You're just sorry you got caught. You only value me now because you finally know what my soil is worth on a corporate balance sheet. That isn't respect. That's just survival." From behind them, Dominic approached the curb, his cardboard box of personal belongings tucked awkwardly under his arm. He looked completely hollowed out, his posture slouched, staring helplessly at the woman he had completely underestimated for 4 long years. He opened his mouth to speak, to beg, to offer an apology he had never intended to give until his entire stolen empire crumbled into absolute dust. But Arya didn't give him the chance. She didn't look back at him. She looked down at the driveway where her personal vehicle sat idling near the rear bumper of a waiting, midnight black town car. Her assistant stepped forward, opening the passenger door for her. "Keep the $100, Dominic," Arya said, turning her back on them as she prepared to step inside the warm luxury of the car. "Consider it my relocation allowance for you and your mother. You have 24 hours to leave my infrastructure." Arya stepped into the vehicle. The door closed with a solid, heavy thud, sealing out the noise and the panic of the crumbling dynasty. As the town car pulled away from the curb and merged into the afternoon traffic, Dominic and Cassandra were left standing on the freezing pavement, completely ignored by the elite world they once thought they ruled, left with nothing